This lesson will cover big concepts from Unit 2 on chapters 2 and 3, looking at population and migration. We can take a look at the world and look at how population density differs in varying parts of the world. The darker the colors, that's typically associated where population density is greatest. And we can see that the greatest density is in East Asia and South Asia, particularly within China and India. The DTM is a very important model that you'll want to know how to navigate. That stands for the demographic transition model, and it is how population has shifted and changed over time. The transition looks different for different countries around the world. So the different stages can also be an identifier for what stage of development a country may be in. The demographic transition compares birth rates and death rates to give you a sense of what the natural increase rate is. Now, taking a look at stage 1, we know that there is no country that is currently in stage 1. Every country has moved at least into stage 2. But early on in the history of the world, we do see that there was a very high death rate and a very high birth rate. But both of those things kind of canceled each other out so that the population growth was not too high. Now, when we look at stage 2, we see that industrialization is playing a big part in this major expansion of the natural increase rate because there is now a very high birth rate and a rapidly decreasing death rate. And so those two things together are going to cause the population to increase rapidly. Now, for these first two stages, even though in stage 1, no country is in stage 1, there might be some very remote areas in specific countries where, a stage 1 might be more the identifier. When we get into stage 2, that would include countries like Egypt, Kenya. India, I would say, has actually moved into a stage 3, but when we look at a stage 3 specifically, we see that it's late expanding. You've got a natural increase rate that is still pretty high, but it's slowing down. And this would include countries like Brazil. The birth rate is falling, the death rate is falling, but more slowly than it was in stage 2. And then the increase overall slows down. It is reflective of improved medical care and diet and fewer children needed. So whereas in stage 2, you see a booming of many kids, you see less kids needed when we're moving into stage 3. Now for stage 1, a lot of the reason that the death rate was so high was because of disease, famine, poor medical knowledge. A lot of children were dying for that reason, but both stage 2 and 3, we see that the population is increasing due to medical care, access to clean water, and sophisticated sanitation systems. And then you also see that fewer children are dying. For stage 4, this might include countries like the United States, Japan, France, and the UK. I would actually say Japan would probably be better classified as a possible stage 5. Remember, stage 5 is just, possible. But looking at stage 4, we see that the birth rate is low, the death rate is low, the natural increase rates are actually much more stable. This is due to the fact that there are far more children being born. This is due to family planning, good health, and the improved status of women. Women now have access to other opportunities. They're not having as many children. They're not having children as early, and they're also putting off marriage. And then it can also be attributed to good health care, reliable food supplies, and then we can see this also continuing into stage 5, which is the possible decline of a population. Now, looking at demographic transition models, we can also see that they can be associated with population pyramids. So you'll want to know how the transition model in the different stages might be reflected in each of these types of pyramids. Looking at how pyramids would be reflected, Again, we don't really see so much of a stage 1 in countries today. We see more of a stage 2. So where you see a much larger base, you see that you've got a high birth rate, and odds are you don't see a very developed nation because you do not see proportional populations of older people to that of younger people. So you've got a high birth rate, a rapid fall in the death rate, increasing life expectancy, and the population is rapidly growing. Once you move into a stage 3, you're going to see it not be so steep a slope here. You've got a declining birth rate, a low death rate, more people living to old age, and a rapidly growing population. Where you look at stage 4, you're going to see it curve here. So in that sense, you see a low birth rate and death rate, longer life expectancy, and an older population that grows slowly, if at all. And then for the possible stage 5, you're actually going to see the slope kind of more so in reverse, where you've got a low birth rate that's falling below the death rate, and then an older population that begins to shrink in size. So again, be familiar with the different population pyramids and how those can be associated with different stages. Here you can see 3 distinctive population pyramids. Here we've got a youthful population. Again, the base is a lot larger. Then we have an aging population. This might be more of a stage 3. So you don't quite see that the populations have aged out yet. Here we see an aged population. So this means that that a country has been in development for a longer period of time. They're definitely already at that stage 4 in development, maybe a possible stage 5, but you start to see the base becomes much more narrow, but you do see that there are larger proportions of the aged population that exist as well. Here you can actually see some unique population pyramids that would include, maybe this one that happens to be in Arkansas. So this is part of the United States where we see distinctively larger male populations. This may have to do with a possible army base or military base. Here, if we look at Lawrence, Kansas, we can see that it could be reflective of a college town where we see a specific age group, particularly in the early 20s, that are reflected, both among males and females. And then we can also see Naples, Florida here. Florida is kind of notoriously known for a lot of older people moving there because of a lot of the tax benefits that come with that and the warmer weather. But either way, we do see a much larger proportion of the population being of that older retirement age. Now that we've talked about population, we can get into migration. You want to know the difference between push factors and pull factors. Push factors are going to impact why people are being pushed out of the countries that they may originally reside in to move to another country. And a pull factor would be something attractive that would be enticing migrants to move to a particular location. So push factors would be contributing to leaving a country. It could include poverty, fear, natural disasters, unemployment. Topics would include environmental, social, economic, or political reasons. Looking at pull factors, you can still include those environmental, social, economic, and political reasons, but the reasons that people would come to that country, maybe they're seeking safety, there are opportunities, there's stability, and maybe also freedom. What you see reflected on this map here are patterns of human migration, and so we can see much out migration is coming from Asia into places like Europe, Australia and Oceania, North America, and we can also see other migration patterns coming out of Africa into North America, Europe, also Oceania. We see that in Latin America, we see lots of movement into North America. So just some examples there. Looking at this map, we can take a look at net migration. So the red will indicate more people going into the country, and the blue will be, more people leaving the country than coming in. And so, if you want to look at it as region, those would be the big identifiers there. Another model that we can look at that is easy to get confused with the demographic transition model is the epidemiologic transition model. And they are correlated, but they're more specific to reasons that people die. And so what are the primary causes of why people die during those specific stages? So looking at stage one, the major reason that folks were dying during stage one had to do with diet. And so nutritional status, for example, children and women suffered the most from low fat intakes, nutritional deficiency, diseases, and stature declines. For stage two, we saw receding pandemics. This means that medical advancements had been made. We don't see as much famine. There's fewer starchy staples, more fruit, vegetables, animal protein, low variety. And then we see continued female and child nutrition problems. Many deficiencies are disappearing. Weaning diseases are emerging, and then stature is starting to grow. So again, the major medical advancements have to do with that. And then looking at stage three, we see degenerative and human-induced diseases. And so that would include the fact that people are eating more fat, especially from animal products, sugar, processed foods, and less fiber. We're starting to see that obesity is becoming a larger problem. Also problems for elderly like bone or health disease. Or bone health disease, sorry, and then many disabling conditions. So again, people are living longer, so when they do pass, it may have to do more so with old age. And then for stage four, we're looking at behavioral change. These are delayed degenerative diseases and emerging infections. We've got higher quality fats, reduced refined carbohydrates, more whole grains, fruit, vegetables, reduction in body fat and obesity, and improvement in bone health. So again, people are living a lot older. So you're still seeing that some of the same reasons for the degenerative diseases are causing death, but they're coming much later in life as people are living longer life expectancies. The next topic has to do with Malthusian theory. And so this is the idea that population would grow geometrically and food production arithmetically. And because the population would grow so rapidly, the production of food would not be able to keep up. Many have argued that the innovations in agricultural advancements really prove Malthusian theory to be less impactful. However, there are also neo-Malthusians that have emerged as well. So let's talk about that and compare that. So remember, Thomas Malthus is the person who put forth this theory, this Malthusian theory. And the idea here is that population is growing faster than the Earth's food supply, and that population increases geometrically while food supply increases arithmetically. Looking at neo-Malthusians, they still believe that there's some relevance in what Thomas Malthus put forward, but they look at it a different way. So there's a transfer of medical technology that's led to a rapid increase in the population in poor countries. The world population is outstripping a wide variety of resources, and wars and civil violence are going to increase because of the scarcity of food and other resources. Critics of Malthus, as well as neo-Malthusians, would argue that large populations may stimulate economic growth, and with that may come innovative ways to be able to respond or limit the impact of these types of issues. So poverty, hunger, and other social welfare problems are a result of unjust social and economic institutions, not the result of not, having the capability to have enough food to go around. So they're kind of separating those two different things. Next, we can look at migration transitions and how those are associated with the stages of the demographic transition. So for stage one, for example, a lot of the reason that folks will be migrating will be for high daily or seasonal mobility and search for food. For stage two, the reason that people might be migrating would be for high international immigration and interregional migration from rural to urban areas. For stage three, it's high international immigration and intra-regional migration from cities to suburbs. And then it would be the same in stage four as it would be in stage three. The last concept here is Ravenstein's laws of migration. So some typical things that we can keep in mind with relation to migration. Some big things that stand out would be most migrations from rural areas to urban areas. Most international migrants consist of young males between the ages of 20 and 45. Most migrations proceed in a step-by-step process. Each migration flow produces at least one counterflow, and females remain more migratory than the males within their own country. Migration increases in volume as industries develop and transportation improves, and the economy is a major factor in migration.